So I've been on the water a lot the last couple of weeks, and I've noticed one thing and one primary bait that the fish are responding to real well, and that's typical of the case for springtime fishing, and it's a Gary Yamamoto custom bait Senko. Pretty hard bait to beat when the fish start coming shallow. They start cruising around, they're looking to set up pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn, and I don't think there's ever a time in the springtime or any other time of that year that I don't go fishing and have a Senko tied on. But it seems like the last couple of weeks, it seems like the bait that I'm always going back to try to catch a fish or catch a few more fish. And I thought what I'd do is I'd kind of go over a little bit about the setups that I use and kind of where I fish the Senko, and a few little tips and techniques that you can use to put a few more fish in the boat next time you go fishing. So the very first thing is, where do I go and look? And primarily here the last couple of weeks, these fish have been relating to little pockets and little flats. Some are right off the main lake, and others are back in creeks. But it seems like for me, I haven't been catching them way up in the cover this year, whether it's water levels or lack of rain in some parts of the country, or just water temperatures. Seems like the fish are out a little bit deeper this year, or a little bit further away from the bank, I should say, because a lot of the water that I'm fishing is 2, 3, and 4 foot deep, but the fish aren't necessarily up against the bank. So that makes fishing a Senko really appealing to me, that because the thing about a Senko is that it draws fish in from distances, so they'll see it as it's falling through the water. And I'm actually fishing the Senko Wacky style and weightless, so that fish has a chance to see it in the water column, even though it's a couple of 2, 3, 4 foot. That bait's going to fall real slow, and it's going to draw the fish to it. I think that's one of the real appealing things about a Senko, is that it draws fish from distances to come and bite it. So that's where I'm kind of finding most of my fish, and sometimes there's cover, sometimes there's really no cover, sometimes it's really isolated cover, but seems to be like the middle of little pockets and little middle bays and places like that is where I'm finding most of my fish, and it's setting up perfectly to fish a Senko. The rod and reel that I fish is pretty much standard, and I usually have a couple of these rigged up, and I'll show you why just in a minute. I'm fishing a 7'1" medium action ducket fishing white ice rod. This is the Pete Pond Signature Series white ice. The rod has quite a bit of backbone, but it has a really nice soft tip that I can not only throw the bait if it's windy, long distances if I need to, but I can also feel what this bait does. This has a real sensitive tip. It's extremely light. It's really strong. It's got a great backbone. It's the perfect all-around rod for doing a lot of things, including fishing a weightless Senko. I've got that matched up with the 14-pound test monofilament line. I like my line to stretch a little bit when I'm fishing a Senko, because I like to let the fish get it. Sometimes in the springtime, they don't always get the bait real well, or the first time they try to bite it, they don't get it real well. So having monofilament lets my line stretch a little bit, and it helps me keep some fish on when I'm setting the hook. I'm not pulling baits out of the fish's mouth. So I like that little bit of stretch. 14-pound Suffix Elite monofilament, perfect. Ducket fishing level 1 bait casting reel. This is the 360 model, super smooth, so I can cast a long distance with a real light weight bait. In the hook that I'm fishing too, and I'll fish a couple of different hooks, and I'll tell you about this in a minute too. I'm fishing a VMC 7316 BN. It's a wide gap, short shank hook, and I primarily fish the 3/0 size hook for most of my Wacky rig Senko fishing. But I will also have a secondary rod rigged up with the very same hook, the 7316 BN, but I'm gonna also have a 2/0 size hook on. And the reason I do that is a lot of times what'll happen when they're out there fishing, this could be weather related, it could be wind related, it could be stages of how these fish actually react in the springtime. One day they'll be super aggressive, the other day not so aggressive at all. And I recently had this happen, and what goes on is that you maybe get a couple of fish that really bite the Senko real well, and all of a sudden you'll get one, you'll set the hook, and maybe you'll have the fish on for a second, he comes off, or maybe they strip the Senko right off the hook and you come back with nothing at all, or you just don't get a good bite out of the fish. So what I'll do is I'll use that kind of backup Senko rig Wacky style as well, with a smaller hook on it, and sometimes a contrasting color or a different color Senko, and I'll throw it back in the same spot. And the second time, generally, if you miss that fish, unless you stick him really good and he comes off halfway to the boat, you can throw back in there and then they'll really eat it good the second time. So I've noticed that, you know, having two different size hooks, one a little bit bigger, the standard 3/0 size, and then having one slightly smaller, the 2/0 size, helps me put a few more fish and helps me catch a few fish that might miss the Senko on the first time. So just a little trick that you guys can use next time you're out there fishing. The colors that I'm fishing are pretty much standard colors, but I have two that I really like a lot more than some of the others. I fish a bunch of different colors, but it seems to me these two colors I've been catching a lot of fish with. This one's a color 301. It's the 9 series, the 5-inch Senko 9 series. And this is in 301, which is green pumpkin and purple green. This is going to be the color that I fish most of all. Kind of looks like a bluegill most of the time, and that's, you know, these shallow fish are kind of sometimes feeding on bluegills. And then I'm going to usually back that color up, like I said, if I get fish that aren't biting real well, or, you know, I make a cast and I get bit and I set the hook and I come back with just a hook. He's actually stripped the Senko off my hook and I need to throw something right back at that fish real quick. I like to throw a contrasting color. And I found last year this color, it's quickly becoming my new favorite color Senko, and this is a 963. This is gooseberry laminate. It's a really good color for a backup, and also if the water's a little bit dingy, a little bit dirty, this is a great color, and you seem to catch a lot of fish on this. You can tend to catch some big fish too on this color. So I'm going to have these two baits primarily the ones I'm going to have rigged 99% of the time. I do like watermelon red flake is a really good color, especially in the springtime, and then straight June bug, which is color 213, is also really good in the springtime. So you can, you know, experiment with different colors, different different colors of Senkos, and, you know, those two for me have been the two this year so far. So rigging the Senko Wacky style is really easy, and I will do one thing with my Senko, and I kind of rig it a little bit differently from a lot of guys, is some guys, when they're rigging their Senko, they're going to rig it Wacky style on the hook, so it's like that. And I like to take a little bit different approach. Sometimes when you rig it like this, you tend to, after, you know, a few fish or a bunch of casts, you may make a cast and throw your Senko out in the lake and come back with just a hook. So I want to get a little bit different bite, or a little bit better bite on my Senko. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rig it Wacky style, but sideways. I'm going to run the Senko in just like that, and I get a much better bite on my bait. It helps keep it on there a little bit longer. I get a few more fish out of my bait, and I tend to hook more fish when it's like this. I have fished it the other way. I really prefer it to be rigged that way across the hook. You just get a better bite on your bait, stays on there a little bit longer, and it doesn't affect the performance at all. I'm going to rig both my baits just like this, and that's the way I prefer to do it. So it's really a simple bait to fish too. You know, what I'm doing most of the time is I'm casting it out either at an object, or a lot of times when I'm fishing these spots out in the open, is I'll look for differences in the shading of the water, maybe a light shading to a dark shading on those little transition pieces, and a lot of times those fish will be cruising or setting up along those things, or maybe by a little piece of cover, maybe it's a bush or a stump or a rock or something like that, and I'm gonna, you know, pitch my Senko out to that spot, and generally I like to just let it fall initially, but I may shake my rod tip just a tiny bit as it's falling through the water column initially, and that a lot of times will attract that fish. When he sees that bait, it's falling like this, and all of a sudden you shake it and the ends kind of wiggle a little bit and give it a little bit of shimmy, and that attracts the fish, and they'll come over and bite it. And it's usually a quick thing. I'm not usually working this Senko all the way back to the boat. I may give it 3, 4, 5 little shakes like that. I'll kind of drag it a little bit and shake it a little bit and let it fall, drag it a little bit, shake it, let it fall, and I'll do this 3 or 4 times. And if I hadn't got bit, say halfway back to the boat, I'm just winding up and I'm throwing back out to another spot. So despite being what you think might be a slow presentation with the Senko Rig Wacky style, I can actually fish it fairly fast. I can fan cast a whole big area. I can fish it really effectively, and I can trigger a lot of those fish to bite my bait in the springtime. So try these colors next time you're out there fishing too. Number 963, which is the gooseberry laminate, and color 301, which is green pumpkin, purple green, my 2 favorite colors in the springtime. I'm Mike DelVisco, and I'll see you on the water.